Just I want to let
Alex?
the answers, the questions answered before we wrap up.
Greg, are you ready?
Sure enough, I still missed it.
Alex, how are we doing?
Alex, are we ready?
See everybody on YouTube?
I'm checking, let me see, waiting for the email. We are on YouTube.
Okay.
So we're
Recording in progress.
Great. Welcome, members of the public. We have exited executive session and now entered into public session of our meeting. Again, this is the workshop meeting for the Township of Chatham for this Tuesday, January 14, 2025. Next up is the proclamation. Yes. Okay. So.
Do we need to flag salute?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As you all know, January is a month in memoriam for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. There is a proclamation that will jointly be read out by the Borough and Township on January 20th on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And that will be made available on the website as well. But I just wanted to make a formal announcement as to that in recognition of the special day. I would now like to proceed to the first hearing of citizens. Mr. LaConte, could you kindly provide guidance as to how the first hearing of citizens shall be conducted?
Members of the public are now welcome to come up to the microphone to address the Township Committee. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are not topics scheduled for public hearings tonight. Those present may step up to the microphone to be heard. If you're watching via Zoom, you may speak during any of the public comment sessions by following the Zoom instructions to raise your hand. Whether in person or online, when you are recognized to speak, please mind the following procedures. Please say your name and spell your last name and give the name of your street. You do not need to give your street number. All public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Rather than use any of your time answering questions, the Township Committee will wait until you finish speaking before responding. There are 2 public comment sessions on tonight's agenda. Each member of the public will be limited to 1 comment of up to 3 minutes during each public comment period. Written comments submitted to the Township Clerk before 3 p.m. today will be read during the public comment sessions. Written comments are subject to the same guidelines as oral comments. Duplicative written comments may be summarized rather than read in full, according to guidelines issued by the New Jersey Division of Local Government Services. And we do not have any written comments tonight.
Thank you, Mr. LaConte. Then at this time, I invite members of the public to approach the mic in the event that you desire to do so. We do not have anyone at the mic, so I now will be closing the first hearing of citizens. Mr. Shahadi, I'd like to move forward to the introduction of ordinances. Could you kindly introduce the first ordinance for this evening?
Sure, Mayor. So actually for the introduction of ordinances and the resolutions, because this is a workshop meeting, it's not usual that we will pass legislation at these meetings. However, these 2 are listed on here in the sake of time and expediency. The first one is an ordinance for special emergency appropriation for the reval, and that is in response to the county mandated reval program that we have to undertake. Revaluations are, typically big ticket items depending on the town, but we were estimating somewhere between $500,000 to $600,000. Those are not usually expenses that towns can absorb in their annual operating budget, and the state does allow for special emergency appropriation. So essentially, it's a way to kind of bond or spread the costs of an expense such as this over multiple years. It's very prescriptive. They set certain things are only 3 years, certain things are only 5 years, only very limited exceptions. Because we went out to bid and just received the bids, we didn't know what the cost was gonna be. We could estimate it, but certainly don't wanna do a special emergency appropriation and fall short. So now that we've gotten the bids were received earlier this, or just end of December, I believe.
Yeah.
And the attorney did review the one bid that we received, and that is why we are now preparing a special emergency appropriation for the reval. We'd like to introduce it this evening, so that way we can adopt it at the next meeting on the 28th, and at that meeting, adopt a resolution to award the contract to the reval vendor that won the bid. We can't award the contract, I've mentioned before in other situations, you can't award a contract unless the funds are there and the CFO is able to certify the funds. So we need to appropriate the funds first, have them adopted, and the goal is to adopt them on the 28th, so that way we can quickly proceed to adopt the resolution to award the contract, so that way they can begin their work as quickly as possible. So that's the ordinance here. We can certainly talk about that later on. You don't need to introduce it right now, but certainly before the end of the meeting. So if there's any questions on that, happy to address those now or later. And then the resolution on authorizing the purchase of the fire truck, that's why we've got 2 representatives from Green Village Fire Department, 2 outstanding volunteers, including the chief, here to talk about the purchase of the fire truck. And the purchase of the fire truck, and I don't know if you want to deal with the ordinance first, Mayor, or you want to go through this one as well?
No, we've already started, so I'm fine with moving on,
Okay.
combining into discussing resolutions and ordinances.
Sounds good. So the purchase of the fire truck, when we last year adopted the capital budget, right, we accounted for an expense for the fire truck based on estimates, and it takes time from actually building on the specs. So this was originally in our capital plan 2023. It evolved into 2024 because we're forecasting multiple years out. And as you get closer and closer, obviously prices go up with most vendors and most things. And until you actually put pen to paper and spec out the product, you don't know the exact costs. So what we had estimated at about 1.2 has now turned into about 1.515, correct, Chief? And would you like me to ask them to come up, Mayor, if you have any questions for them, or you want to deal with that later?
Well, I did want to thank you for
Yeah.
providing the briefing on the ordinance and resolution. I did want to open up to members of the committee if they had any questions or would like to discuss first the special emergency appropriations of the reval, and then I would like to invite members of the fire department with regard to the resolution.
Sure.
The only question I had was, it's over 5 years that we do the emergency appropriation, and that has to be booked to operating expense?
Correct. So essentially, it's like a deferred charge. Now, you can do it in different, some towns will borrow for the money, but we don't need to borrow from the money. One of the good things, one of the great things about what we've been doing recently, and John's been good with ups and downs, the pandemic hit it, is having good fund balance. Because what you can do is essentially borrow against yourself. So we take the money in order to pay for this from our fund balance, but every year we have to book almost like a deferred charge, put, that, let's say it's $650 divided by 5, put that amount every year in that operating budget. So it's important for taxpayers and residents to hear this, that this is an expense that for the next 5 years we're gonna have to be contributing towards in order to repay ourselves from the fund balance, in order to make ourselves whole. But that will ultimately, it could start from this year or it could start from the following year. The law allows you from the following year. So
it's not currently accounted in this.
We're putting the budget together. That's what we're gonna, one of those decisions, if we wanna reduce our future obligations, and that goes into kind of looking at your trends for your fund balance and what revenues look like. So this is, once this is adopted, that's one of those decisions that the finance committee is gonna have to look at.
And Mr. Shahadi, am I correct in characterizing that the circumstances by which this has come before us is that the Morris County Tax Board independently came to a decision and put forth a requirement by the township to do a reval?
Correct.
Yes, okay, thank you. Wonderful. Now, so with regard to the authorization of the purchase of the fire truck, if I may invite members of the fire department, if you'd like to come before.
Sure.
The mic, thank you.
So to clarify, this authorization here is for about 1.2, just under 1.2. That's not the full amount of the truck, and the chief can speak to that. The apparatus is a rescue, correct?
Yep.
It's a rescue, as I said, the total purchase for what they would like is about 1.515. But because we don't have that full amount, we've asked the vendor to break out the specs and give us a quote and a spec sheet for what we currently can afford, which is how much we have in the budget from our capital ordinance from last year. The balance of that will come forward later by way of a change order, but would be something we would need to account for in our 2025 capital budget. Now, because these trucks have a long lead time, I think the quote said average 24 months, right? We have time to make those changes, and the split out, the breakout of what we're getting now with this authorization and what we would look to get at is something that's not, it's something that can come later as a change order. It's not that, the way they're building the truck, it's something that they know will come later, but is not gonna hold up the process until that happens. So just understand that with this authorization, and I don't wanna speak for you, but this is what you're gonna hear from the chief, is that in the future, for 2025's capital budget, we're gonna need to appropriate an additional amount of money to make up the balance of the total cost of this vehicle. And the purchase of this would be coming through a cooperative council, Houston Galveston, which is the kind of premier one, the most popular one nationwide that municipalities, counties use for purchasing emergency apparatuses. And so the vendor, Sutphin here, is a member of that co-op, so that's how we got that quote. Chief?
I think you touched on most major parts. Beyond,
Try to make your job easier.
I love it. Yeah, you do this all the time, right? So no, I appreciate working with us on this, kind of breaking it out. I think it's important that we get slotted in at this time, especially with the long lead times. Fortunately, this particular vendor is probably the quickest on the market. Most other major vendors are trending more like a 3-year build out. We're closer to like a 2, so we're pretty happy about trying to get in early and then trying to get the truck to us early, so we can put it in service, obviously. Quicker we get it here, the quicker we can have it protect the town and whatnot. The truck itself, yes, it is a rescue. It's replacing our current rescue, which is a 2000. It's been of great service to us, but this particular truck will have a full Class A pump on it. So not only will it be a rescue, it'll allow us to do heavy fire suppression as well. So in those cases, if you're running into a situation with lighter manpower, you can do more with less. Being a rescue, if an initial call goes out like a car fire, there was one even this fall actually on the Chatham Township side. Car fire extended to a second car and then started to enter into the structure. Very common kind of call, let alone, we're seeing more increased, EVs on the road. A traditional rescue truck that might have a limited amount of water, or just, one like ours that currently has, a heavy array of extinguishers on there, doesn't quite have the fire punch, the fire attack that this truck will be able to have. So, as we've seen, and it is true, something like an EV fire would require a ton of water, which this would be able to provide and support. So part of the design, and also with the, the ability to get that slotted and then treat these change orders, or upgrades, however you would like to view them, would really give us the piece that we feel will best suit the town for our efforts. So. I don't know if there's any particular questions on what they are, or?
Not on that, actually.
Okay.
The question's pretty basic. And that is, if we're looking at a future change order, and thank for that future change order, is there any, placing an order today, does that impact your pricing that you would receive? Can you speak to that?
Sure. The change order itself, we cannot lock into today's pricing. It's going to be subject to whatever it is at that time. On average, we see a 2 to 3% annual increase over the course of the year. So for round figures, it's about 300,000. I'm not going to try to math in my head, but you get the idea. So fortunately, the about a quarter of the value or less will be subject to that increased price. So fortunately, it's the vast minority of the cost of the apparatus.
Is there time sensitivity to getting this in queue?
That helps a lot. And actually, in this particular case, the price increase that we're trying to chase is going to go into effect tomorrow. So, for this initial purchase, we're, you know, with the help of the committee and particularly Z, who really, we were back and forth hammering this out, got us in just right under the wire. So, provided this all works out, we'll beat it within the 24-hour span.
And that's one of the reasons why the resolution is on for
Yes.
the workshop tonight, is to make sure that we lock in that rate before the new rate, then the whole package goes up,
Yes.
as opposed to just the change order. So that's number one.
Yeah,
And
that was
number
big.
two, I always have to say this, so the residents, we look at every opportunity for grants, and this was one of the apparatuses that we put in for was it last year's, I think,
We did.
AFG grant, 2024. And we got denied for it, and it's not because I think the applications aren't great and we could put the best application. It's a very competitive grant, and they really look at need. They look at need, they look at the demographics of the community, and I hate to, Chatham is just not one of those competitive municipalities when you look at the what fits the criteria for what the feds are trying to fund. So we are left to our own devices, and that's unfortunately taxation.
So, Mr. Shahadi, I thank you for putting in the work to come up with a creative solution on structuring the pricing. So in summary, if I understand this, by virtue of approaching it this way, Chief, we can protect ourselves in terms of any possible future costs with regard to the base truck, the 1.2 portion.
Correct.
However, we are unable to provide any guarantees on cost, solidifying the cost on the additional 300,000 piece, because that's a future item. And you're comfortable with the funding for that work order, 300,000 work order, to come from the capital plan in
2025.
Right, okay.
Chief, could you talk about it, because I know you guys had a request for an apparatus for
Sure.
2025, and that was part of our, I think, 7-year presentation. Could you talk about
Absolutely.
your intentions with that, please?
So originally we had slated to replace engine 4. We were, once again, a couple of years out trying to figure out a long-term plan, figuring 500,000 or so for that apparatus. We have obviously not even started looking into that and whatnot. The situation we're dealing with now came about. One of the solutions, working with Z, Debbie and Ed, we all came up with, as well as members of the Greenville Fire, was to delay that truck build. Take the funding for that we were originally slating and appropriating it to this. So I think by shifting that, we'll be okay. It is one of our, we run the truck, obviously. It's a frontline truck, but it probably runs less than the other 3 apparatus that we have. It's well maintained, low mileage. It's a pretty good working order, so we felt comfortable with moving that down the road, committing to this, because without getting the truck built, in our opinion, without getting it built the way that we feel it should be built, what's the sense, really? Just, do it right or don't do it, that kind of thing. So here we are, and we thought it was a better play to manage it this way, and then that'll allow a less expensive truck to be dealt with down the road that will obviously be subject, costs always go up. They never seem to go down in that field, that's for sure. But that's what we felt was the best solution, and that was the reasoning behind our approach.
So what's the long-term, I guess, usage or expectancy of that other truck that you bypassed in favor of the other one?
So we'd use a general metrics of 20 years for most fire apparatus. Some run harder than others. Like, this is our mini engine. Our primary engine runs way more often. That would be, more of an importance if you just use that as a comparison. But just the rescue truck itself is already 24 years old. By the time we take receipt of it, it's going to be 26 to 27 years old.
Sure.
So, this truck that we are pushing down is a 2004. So, it's 21 at the time. But we felt, that this one makes more sense for us.
The timing of the payments, I don't know who I'm asking. What's the timing, do we know?
So generally with these, payment's not due, and it's due in full until, you take delivery of the vehicle.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
The deposit isn't due, right?
I believe they don't require a deposit, correct? I think
I don't think
They
so.
don't require a deposit. I mean, the other one, same thing with, they don't require deposits on these. Yeah, so we just pay at the end, and we've looked at, I mean, that's why we've explored whether prepayment, we can get some discounts, deposit discounts, and they have given us some discounts, but the discount is actually less than what we would be paying if we were to, because in order to make that payment, we would have to actually finance the bond. So as I said last year, said we're bonding for these things, we're not actually gonna borrow for them until we need them. And that saves us money. So rather than borrowing the full 1.2 and having it sit in our account, yes, we'd be gaining interest, but we'd also be paying interest on it. And then whatever interest we'd be, or whatever discount we'd be getting is overshadowed by that cost. So we just wait until then. In some cases, sometimes deposits make sense, and these, it does not, and, you know, they didn't require it.
Don't forget your microphone.
No?
No, I'm gonna tell you don't forget your microphone.
Oh, I think on these we're good because we're using the,
Somebody said they can't hear you.
they can't hear me? Oh, okay,
Oh.
sorry. Oh, That's, anything else?
Just remember next time.
Anyone else from the committee? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I just, you know, I'm Dan Miller, and I'm vice president, and I'm also pretty much a daytime operator down at the department. And first I wanted to say, you know, I wanted to thank Mike and all the folks that were on our truck committee who put in endless hours, you know, and just, you know, to get it out there all the time that we all are volunteers. You know, both sides of town is all volunteer fire departments. And, you know, we're always looking for more people to come out. Mike's been chief now for what, 7 years, Michael?
Not yet.
Almost 7 years.
I'm serving my sixth.
Okay, serving your sixth. You know, and, you know, everybody, you know, at the drop of a hat, you know, not only myself, but everybody stops what they're doing and goes out. And this particular vehicle that you're looking at bonding will actually help us manpower-wise, because we will be able to handle a vehicle fire and extraction all with one set of apparatus, as opposed to now where it takes two. You know, and sometimes when you have low manpower, you know, you have to make choices. So this will eliminate all that, and it's very important, and you know, it'll be very helpful. And the only other thing I wanted to say was I wanted us to all remember our brothers and sisters out in Los Angeles. You know, they're working really hard out there, and there's, you know, been loss, and not just property, and we need to remember that. And we need to remember how important it is to keep up our infrastructure and our apparatus and everything that we need to do in order to keep our community safe out here. It was very dry out here this year too. We had a couple. We had one vehicle fire over on Runnymede, which actually started to spread to the bushes, but we, through mutual aid, both Green Village and Chatham Township, we were out there and we took care of it before we lost anything. And also we had one on Shumpike that caught fire, and we were able to make sure that it didn't spread to any of the houses or the day school. So, you know, we work very hard out there, and we appreciate your support as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan and Chief. I appreciate the words. And I think I speak on behalf of the committee that we're delighted we can help push this forward for you. So thank you. Would you like to move on to reports, Mr. Shoddy?
So we can move into reports now, or since we've, unless there's any questions on either the reval or the purchase, if you want to knock those two legislative items out.
Yeah, are we doing votes for both of those?
We are.
Those
yes.
both will need votes, the ordinance and the resolution, if you're comfortable with that. I do want to just take a moment to thank the chief and his department, because we've been, yes, thank you.
If you want to stick to the agenda as written, we can vote on those before we move on to the reports.
Sure.
So I do want to thank the chief and his team, and also our team, CFO Debbie, and Assistant Treasurer Ed, coming up and working with them to come up with this plan, so.
Yes, no,
Thank you.
thank you for everybody's service, of course, but then when I saw the 20 pages, I think that the fire truck, I didn't even know you could have that many specs for a vehicle.
Well, they list every screw on there, so.
Everything.
Oh, it was very detailed, like,
It
I'm a
was a
glutton for
lot.
punishment,
Yeah, it's
I
a
thumbed through that thing.
Well, they're
Yeah.
clearly doing very well if they don't take any deposits, and they're
Yeah.
able to front it for 2 years to
Yeah.
build, and they're doing okay.
Yeah, really.
So yes, Mayor, would you like
So
to
the-
deal with those first?
Yes,
Okay,
so,
then one at a time, introduction,
yeah, introduce the ordinance 2025-01, special emergency appropriation for reevaluation.
I will make a motion to introduce.
I will second.
Thank you. Mr. LaConte?
Mr. Alperowitz,
Yes.
Mrs. Ewald,
Yes.
Mr. McHugh,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Rowland,
Yes,
Mayor Choi.
Yes.
Motion passes and public hearing will be on January 28th.
Thank you, Mr. LaConte. Now on to Resolution 2025-049, authorizing purchase of fire truck.
I will make a motion to approve resolution 2025-49.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Mr. Alperowitz,
Yes.
Mrs. Ewald,
Yes.
Mr. McHugh,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Rowland,
yes.
and Mayor Choi.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. LaConte.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate
Thank you,
it
gentlemen.
very much.
Good night, guys.
Thank you so much for the support.
We're off to our reorg meeting now.
So we appreciate you coming in also.
No, of course.
They already started, so we're
Started
probably down a
without
bunch of committees that we didn't
Yeah,
really
really.
want
There you go.
Good
Thank
night,
you
all.
again, gentlemen.
Thank you
Have a
very
good
much.
evening.
Have a nice night.
Thank you.
Chief, we'll talk tomorrow about the contract and getting a hold of,
Absolutely, yeah. I
first
think-
thing, but let them know it will be signed in the morning.
Yep, paperwork, et cetera,
Thank you.
All right, very good, thank you.
Great. Mr. Shoddy, we move on to reports.
And I got the microphone. Thank you. I remembered. So first item that I had listed was the resolution of the fire truck, which we took care of. The next one is the resolution for affordable housing, which we did discuss in executive session, but we will have more information at the next meeting for the public on that one. The next item is the communications land lease. So as you are aware, we went out to bid. Our attorney, Ms. Cafoni, prepared a memo on that. We went out to bid because the current holder of the lease on the property behind, or on the DPW property, which houses our tower, that lease has expired, and we went out to bid to solicit more competitive proposals and see what happens. And I'm happy to report that I think we fared pretty well. We are getting a nice upfront advance, and we are making quite a bit more rent than even the reserve we set for it, and what it would have been had it continued. And it accounts for escalators. Because it is a land lease in New Jersey, correct, it requires an ordinance as opposed to a resolution.
Yep.
So that's listed on the agenda. Are there any questions or concerns for that?
I did have a question about that. There's a substantial difference in the two bids that you received, which is fantastic, but it also raises a question of why. For a number of reasons. I guess my only real questions were, are there things in place already that will restrict the height of what they build on the property, or, and I'm sure there's already things in place that will restrict any kind of interference with other cellular systems and emergency response systems and everything along those lines.
So right now-
Either one of those bids that came in, so it's not specific to the winning bid.
Right.
It just raised a question or two in my mind.
So right now, they're not building anything because we have a tower there. The last leasehold, the current, I should say, built the tower, if I'm not mistaken, but as part of that agreement, that tower stays. It becomes our property. So they occupy the tower by putting antennas on that tower. But if they wanted to take that down, build something new, there's a condition in there that they still have to meet all government approvals. So they would still have to come before the board for anything. Now, the FCC and the federal government have pretty much preempted a lot of municipal oversight when it comes to cellular communications and towers. So there is some, wiggle room there, but they are largely, they've got a lot of flexibility.
Largely federally regulated, especially with regard to interference and that type of thing, so. And as for the difference in cost,
Yeah,
I can't explain it.
not looking for justification
Yeah.
there.
So to the committeeman's point though, if they potentially have, 10 whatever they're called, attached to the tower, and the new entity wants to put 20, we don't have a sense of that right now. But the other one could have done more anyway.
Yeah,
Correct. The other one could have, the good thing, at least to us, is the more they put on there, the more money we do get. Because in addition, we would be getting 50% of the rents. So essentially, they're subletting to carriers. So they manage, they'll solicit, they'll say, we're gonna get Verizon, we're gonna get AT&T, we're gonna get, you know, that, the one that advertises to the seniors at night on, you know, we're gonna get all these carriers and put them on there. We get 50% of that. But again, they still have to get all the required approvals from federal level all the way down.
Okay.
So, just to reiterate, you said that, so because of the land lease, the requirements that this will be an ordinance.
As opposed to, yeah, typically we would award bids by resolution, but because this is not only just awarding the bid, but it's executing a lease for the property, it requires an ordinance.
Generally, when you're affecting, the use of land or land rights, you're doing an ordinance.
So any objections to having that set for the next meeting? Okay.
No, we welcome revenue.
Yeah.
Salary ordinance range, so I did include an analysis on that, and a memo to accompany that, the salary ordinance range. It's part of my effort just kind of be proactive and look forward. Any questions or concerns on that? If okay, I would be using the columns to the far right that are highlighted to draft the ordinance, hopefully with introduction at the 28th, and then adoption would be in February.
I was trying to see if you
Yes.
had responded to me, so I know I sent in my questions late. The,
Subcodes?
yes, does that factor in enough time for them to?
Yeah, so that's the reason there's such a variation. So in one column next to the 2022 ordinance, actually I'm sorry, the 2024 resolution, which sets rates, there are two figures, a lower figure and a higher figure. That's because we have a range of officials and inspectors, and different ones work different hours currently. So that's why you see a big range in what they're currently compensated. Plus, some of them have been with the township longer. So it's the hours, the number of hours, the number of days, and excuse me. So the range that I'm providing for is still wide enough that accounts for if we want to include more hours. But I also added under the part-time non-salaried section, the same position but hourly rates. So that way, if we wanted to bring in, right now, individuals are salaried, but they are all serving a set schedule with a set number of hours per week. If we just wanted to bring somebody in for 1 or 2 hours a week, not salaried, but sort of as a per diem or as an as needed, that gives us the flexibility to do that as well.
Okay. Yeah, because I just want to make sure I knew that we had to get additional hours
Yep.
in order to
It
get
accounts
stuff
for
done. Okay, awesome, thank you.
Mr. Shahadi, could you provide a brief summary of the process by which you came to the ranges,
Sure.
so that we can have appreciation for these numbers to be competitive, relevant, and within reason?
Absolutely. So there were a number of factors that I considered. One was where people currently are, right, in terms of salaries. Over the last couple of years, individuals have resigned, retired, we've hired some folks. That's given me and the township really a good idea of what the current market is demanding. And most recently, there's one in your agenda packet for executive session we'll discuss later. Kind of gives you an idea of how the market has been trending upwards, and I think making more leaps, to greater numbers than sort of a consistent, 2% or 3% COLA. But I looked at where they currently are, and I projected, as I did in 2022, a typical COLA increase. If we were to do 2% every year based off of their current rates, what would that put us? And I looked at that through 2028, so that way we've got a range that will last us at least through there. That was one thing I looked at. The other one I looked at were certain positions that are just in greater demand in municipal government. That's based on conversations in person. I have municipal manager association meetings at the county level we meet, and statewide, and then we also distribute emails often. One town might be hiring a rec director or a public safety director or a police chief, and they're asking us all, how much do you spend? And we get spreadsheets that they've collected at that point in time. And so I use those numbers as well. Now, it's hard to just use that and come up with I know, Mayor, you would love a matrix that says, here's how much every town's, let's say, police chief.
I keep asking.
I know, and it's almost impossible to come up with something that's gonna equalize and give you the information you're looking for, because some of them are wearing multiple hats. Some people have worked at a municipality longer. Some people are just even geographically, it varies as well. And then how big is the population of the town, the geographic area of the town? Is there a sewer utility? Is there a parking authority? And you're never going to be able to capture all of that in just a simple, survey and have all of these municipalities respond to you in a uniform manner to get that. So I used some information that I've had from those surveys that we've done informally over the last 2-3 years that I've been here. And then the other one was also looking at current vacancies that we've had recently and the salary requirements of applicants. I'll use most recently was the construction official, and then we've had as well, our pool manager. So looking at what people are requesting in there, and that's not to say we have to give them what they request, but the pool of applicants has been shrinking, and that's not just in Chatham, it's everywhere. I hear that from administrators all throughout the county that are all having a hard time filling critical positions and filling positions with qualified, capable people, and they all say the same thing. We're hamstrung by either the salary ordinances or what elected officials are willing to pay. And so if we want to make sure that we've got good talent, we keep the talent that we have that we're happy with, we can recruit good talent when people resign or retire, then the key is having ranges that give us that flexibility. And this ordinance is just that. It sets ranges, a minimum and a maximum. Ranges are set when we hire somebody by resolution that you adopt. So it's still, you have another opportunity to approve and review the salary that's being set, and also at annually when we adopt salary resolutions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Shoddy. So the short of the long is there's no centralized database.
No.
It's very much an art form, but certainly benefiting from your many years of serving in municipalities to be able to call up folks and cull together data and rely on inbound data as far as what people are asking and where things seem to be in the market.
I appreciate your trust in me there.
Thank you, Mr. Shoddy.
Are there any objections to those ranges or concerns or further questions on that?
On to the next item.
Thank you. So the next item is colony fees. So in an effort to, get the fees set earlier and earlier every year, so this is yet another year where we're moving it up earlier, taking care of it in January, but it's also, I think, it's still a reasonable time frame to give us the opportunity to close out the year, really analyze the numbers, solicit feedback from the members by way of the survey that we did, look at what the revenue looks like. It takes time to close out the books based on bills that are still needing to be paid and all. So this is, I provide you with a spreadsheet that analyzes all of that, I believe, and includes in there a proposal for 2025 that is, I think, still a very modest but important increase for us in order to generate more revenue for the pool, so that way it is self-sustaining. Last year in 2024, the revenue was about $250,000. Salaries alone, and these are critical salaries. There's really little fluff there. These are lifeguards, the manager, the instructors, the coaches. Those salaries right there, that's about $186,000. So that's eating into the revenue, and then you've got your operating expenses. So this year we had about $150,000 in operating expenses, and it's been averaging, I would say, we look at over the past couple of years. In 2022 it was 125. Last year was a little less, but that's based on feedback that the managers will give and say, hey, we really need to invest in more lifeguard stands. We need to upgrade the PA system. This year we put in railings based on feedback from the residents coming down the stairs from the snack stand. So we had more expenses this year. Now all of these do come, all this does come from our open space budget. We do account for a couple $100,000 for each of our facilities, whether it's Nash, whether it's the pool. So we account for this, but this, in 2024, we had a gap of about $85,000. So the pool ran at an $85,000 loss just this year. It's better than it was in 2022, which was 107, $107,000 loss. And now we're also making sure that we've got good accounting of all of our expenses, including past debt service and capital projects. So with that, I think it's important that we keep up with our costs are going up. Chlorine is getting more and more expensive. The feedback from residents is more in terms of maintenance, just the daily maintenance of the facilities, but also things like our pump house is starting to fall into disrepair. That's a major expense. And all of these, whether it's bonded, whether it's coming out of open space, these are all real costs that we've got to account for the pool. And if we don't if we don't adjust the rates year after year, then we end up in a situation with 5 years where we're looking back wondering, why are we so far off on our rates? And I did look at municipalities in the area, other competing pools, and our rates, and I think I included the New Providence and the borough, our rates are not high. I think they're a very good value, and I think the survey results also did show that people think we offer a fair value for what we're providing.
Thank you, Mr. Shoddy. Yeah, I would agree. I understand that Colony is a beloved amenity asset to the township. The reality is costs are escalating across the board. I do understand that operating a facility is not an insignificant endeavor. I would agree that based on the modest increase in the fees is based on a considered effort. We have looked at competitive substitutes, most notably New Providence, and I think maybe one or two others, and comparatively it does appear to offer a very high value relative to other facilities and their respective fees. So I thank you for that, Mr. Shoddy.
New Providence, in the documents you sent us, they have an initiation fee for new members, correct? And we do not have something like that. Did you give consideration into instituting something like that for?
I'll be honest, I did not. That has not been the tradition here. Not to say that we can't break with tradition, but I was not about to introduce something like that. And they charge a very hefty initiation fee. But granted, it's a one-time contribution. Yeah, but I should also know that New Providence. I don't know how many people do know. That is not a government pool either. So that is a independent, private, nonprofit entity governed by their own board of trustees as well. So. So the short answer is no, I didn't consider that. I did notice it, but I didn't consider it because I'm not walking into that landmine.
And by discussing it this evening and in preparation for the end of January meeting, this would allow us to publicly post the new updated fees in a timely fashion to be well positioned for the offering of the early bird. Yes.
So. The early bird starts March 1st. We start sending out postcards on those typically in mid-February. I want to move that up earlier. If there's no major objections to this, we'll start entering the information, but pending obviously adoption on the 28th of that resolution. That way we can go ahead and have the printer mail that out either the first or second week, no later, advertising early bird rates and registration and full-scale marketing effort online as well, and we'll email all the members well.
Terrific.
My only comment was, given the increase is 5% and then the early bird discount is 5%, why don't you just tell them they can lock in last year's rate? Just make life a little bit easier.
I did not with the
because it was off $1 or $2 because you're 5% on the
5%
lower value,
lower,
5%, yeah.
Yep, that makes sense. And the proposed, I figured that's a negotiation, whether you want to go with that 5 or go with a different number, certainly. But I think 5, if you look at it, right, a resident family, regular, you're talking about $30 increase for the year. That's and if you take advantage of the early bird discount, that's no increase. So it'll hopefully encourage people to do early bird, although it does benefit us more if people pay the full rate.
So sign up early and often?
Sign up early and sure, sign up often too.
Any other comments or questions for members of the committee?
Okay, thank you. And just to note that these rates still are in line with the pool ordinance as well, because there's a pool ordinance that sets ranges, and I did check that these still fall within that range. But we probably should update that through the end of this year or early next year.
think I'm the colony pool liaison now, so I'll just share it with the, after
Yes.
this meeting, or
If
if you wanna
you're all okay
amend
with
it,
it, yeah.
and then, cause you're gonna,
Yes, I'll put together a draft of the resolution, so the numbers are clean and
yeah,
more easy.
just to make them aware.
Okay. And then a heads up that, not for this meeting, but the next workshop meeting, I'm expecting 3 memos from our land use board manager, our construction official and zoning official, and our fire prevention official. They have noticed that certain fees have not been adjusted over time to account for things like notice in the newspaper. I'll use that as an example. For the boards, the advertising costs are greater than they are than we're charging applicants. On the other hand, it's also some fees are not consistent with what the state table provides for, let's say under Uniform Construction Code, or there's opportunities for certain things that we have not been charging for that should be captured. So I've asked those 3 individuals to prepare memos that show what those fee proposals are, what they're requesting, what the current fee is, and some comparisons to neighboring municipalities. So that would probably be February and March. Just wanted to give you a look forward. Any questions or thoughts on those?
And this would be entirely for the construction?
It'll be for the land use boards, because there's a separate for planning board, zoning board, that's one. Then fire prevention, so inspections of those carbon monoxide, you've got life hazard, non-life hazard inspections of, say, restaurants, retail establishments, office buildings, things like that. And then the third one is the construction as well, permits, types of permits, what exactly the work is that's being done. The schedule really should be updated to match what the state allows for.
Any questions or comments? No?
All right.
Please proceed, Mr. Shoddy.
Under the clerk section, and I categorize this under the clerk section, the business and landlord insurance registry is a lot of registrations and licensing, sort of general ones fall under the clerk's office. This is a law that was passed a couple of years ago, and it requires businesses and landlords to maintain insurance, essentially, and provide proof of that insurance to the municipality, and allows the municipality to also charge for that form, processing and maintaining that database. So I did include in the packet, I believe, should have been a local finance notice and some background information on this. We don't have that ordinance here. We do have an ordinance on landlords to some degree having to register.
Where there is a landlord registration that the state requires that we've been doing for a long time. This is something different from that. This is more targeted to the insurance, the minimum insurance, and as the administrator indicated, the business is having to provide proof of that, and we can charge a fee for that, so we could hopefully have an ordinance ready for review, I guess, at the next workshop.
We'd be really following the state template on this one, and it's to make sure that businesses and landlords have the minimum insurance requirements, because there really is no oversight of that. They're supposed to have it, but if they don't, if the policy lapses, if it's not adequate, if somebody slips and falls in a parking lot, something happens, this makes sure that our visitors and residents are safe if they're patronizing a business in town, or if they are a tenant or visiting a multi-unit residential property.
And the act also spells out the fines for noncompliance if once we have this ordinance in effect.
Any questions or concerns there? Okay.
That's common that most towns have it, or most towns don't have it, or?
This registry, it's new legislation. I think they only put out the notice in 2022,
Okay.
following recent legislation. So some towns have them, some towns don't yet. This is part of my conversations with other administrators and just reading news and bulletins and things like that. Noticed that we don't have that, and so we want to correct that. And there are, there's a ton of things that sometimes the state puts out notices on, and they kind of just, it's like the state cries wolf all the time about things. So you got to really catch what they're saying and see whether it's important or not. And
Right.
this is one of those things we don't want to fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
I don't know how many towns have it yet.
Right.
I can guarantee you not all of them have it either. So.
Yeah.
The next item is a bylaws update, which is your bylaws. So I know as the reorg and the transition period was occurring. There were some questions about subcommittees and liaisonship, so that's why we added that here for you guys to have a discussion on that, if you so wish.
Yes, and I know I definitely contributed to that, so,
I'm not pointing fingers, naming names.
there were a couple of positions that just, you know, in terms of, trying to allocate all of the work across, the committee members, there just were a couple of positions that seemed, that you could fold them into other, I think maybe there was a separate recreation that you could fold into the, like admin role committee, and in terms of the, you know, additional work, it's pretty much the same. So, and it made sense, cause you would have those discussions together, so there were a couple of things like that that I remember, so, and I don't know if there's anything else driving it, but I know that was my.
That was one of them, and I think
Well, I
the other
think
was
public
the
utilities
Yeah.
and recreation were the two, and the implication, so the notion here is not that, we're gonna remove the work or any duties associated with those roles. Historically, I think it is something that, perhaps didn't warrant, you know, significant time or full-time effort. So, in order to be efficient and, you know, avoid having for the sake of name or template, you know, committee appointments, I think we're trying to be efficient and create roles that actually have substantive responsibilities and work. So those two positions we thought might be we'd benefit by having those two positions rolled into some of the existing other positions.
Now I'm trying to remember while we're in there, was there anything else we needed to clean up, Mr. Clerk?
I will review them to see if there's any suggestions that I have. I was wrapped up since our reorg with all the reorg business,
Yeah,
but I will, I'll take a look through to see if I have any recommendations.
okay, thank you.
I think it was just a resolution at the time. I think there was, I don't know if it's applicable to this part, not the bylaws, but this is something I mentioned to both Jen and Mike is with the roles and responsibilities of the OEM, to have a member of the public safety committee, at least one member, be part of that organization or present during those meetings. I don't think that's a bylaw thing. I think that was more of a role and responsibility of an ordinance. I think that was discussed.
And I wasn't sure if that was part of the crafting of the OEM, so I did, participate as mayor, and but I don't think
That would be
formally.
the LEMC, just to clarify. So the
Oh,
OEM
okay.
is, that's an employed kind of department agency, but correct me if I'm wrong, you're referring to the Local Emergency Management
Correct.
Council. So there's the council, which essentially like an advisory committee, let's say, to the OEM coordinator and deputy coordinator. That's the one that we've been meeting. So the mayor is on there, and
Okay.
but there is no slot for, you know, let's say a rep from the governing body's public safety committee. So, you know, you could incorporate something like that in your bylaws as well, but the LEMC is defined by ordinance, and that's required to be defined by ordinance, so it's positions. So that would also be an ordinance update there, if you wanted to include that.
And then is in the bylaws about the communications for the public meetings?
Oh, that would be in the bylaws, that we can incorporate that into the bylaws.
What aspect of communications, because the Open Public Meetings Act defines how we notice our meetings.
Yeah, so, my understanding is the state requires the notification of meetings to be published in the newspapers.
So the law is that we're not required to publish anything. We're required to send by snail mail to the newspapers. It's up to them whether they choose to publish. But,
Correct. So the only obligations that we are supposed to do for the public to be informed that we're meeting, is.
the bulletin, yeah, you heard me recite it, yes.
Let the committee finish with.
Which I think we do just fine, we cover those bases. The notification, should they publish that, are both behind firewalls, paywalls. So there really isn't an opportunity for the public to know that we're meeting, except for a banner or notification that's hung on our walls. We always go the extra step by publishing it on our website. We always go the extra step by publishing on our social media channels. My recommendation is these are things we do already in the interest of the public to know and be informed that these meetings are taking place so that they can participate or they can tune in. My recommendation is to make it official that we put it in writing that we do these extra things. It's things that we're already doing, and I think in today's communication channels, we should make it official that we're taking those extra steps. I don't think there's any more work on our behalf. So that was my recommendation on taking a review of the bylaws. It just seems strange to me that it's not already in there.
But I think it's reasonable in terms of, you know, it sets a standard going forward. Because if we're not here, then it's good to set the standard going forward that other committee members will
Yeah,
make sure
correct.
that, you know, or administrations will make sure. You look puzzled.
Oh, no, I don't look puzzled. I'm not puzzled at all. No, sorry, I
I mean,
apologize.
let's be honest, if you poll the community, I don't think they're paying for subscriptions to the Chatham Courier in order to find out when we're meeting, and they're not walking the halls to see when our meeting is. I think we already are very proactive. I think we might as well make it official that we maintain that level of proactivity so that the public are invited to the meetings and are aware of them.
So rather than treat this as a bylaw matter, perhaps we would have an ordinance to separately have that be our own requirement upon ourselves, not only for the Township Committee, but I've been doing the same thing for the Board of Health, and you may want to consider requiring the Planning Board and the Zoning Board and have their manager do the same work that I do for Board of Health and Township Committee as far as website updates, which, you know, the Planning Board and Zoning Board for the most part are doing the same things anyway. But I would suggest that be a standalone thing rather than a bylaw, since all those other boards, which are also subject to the Open Public Meetings Act, and the Environmental Commission is also subject to open public meetings, you know, have it be a standalone thing that any board subject to OPMA meet whatever additional standards the township wants to set beyond what the state law requires.
Mr. LeConte, question. Is there a requirement that one or both publications need to be paid publications?
Yeah, they have to be subscription-based, printed newspapers, which I believe the state may be making some adjustments because print newspapers are becoming a thing of the past. And to Committeeman Alperowitz's point, I believe there was something, Tina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was something where legal ads can't be behind a paywall anymore, that they have to be open for anybody and everybody in the spirit of actual transparency. But yeah, there are regulations about actual not necessarily subscription, but an actual paid-for newspaper. And as I started to touch on before, the state requirement is not that I publish. We do publish an annual notice for the full normal meeting schedule. We do publish that for all our boards. But if we have a special meeting, all the state requires is that I just simply mail them the notice, put it on the bulletin board, and file it with myself. You know, that's the absolute minimum we have to do to remain compliant, but we do go above and beyond that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. LeConte. I think priority one is that we're in compliance, right? So to ensure that, and it sounds like we're doing that. I have no objections to looking into further to codify the additional means by which we disseminate information for the benefit of the public. So unless there's any other questions or comments or objections, something we can look into.
So is there any guidance or direction as to a draft of bylaws yet for the next meeting, or would you like to carry this? Because we're talking about the bylaws with respect to the subcommittee and the liaisonship, is what I'm hearing, to that ordinance. Do you want us to move ahead with drafting an amendment to that ordinance?
I I would like to move ahead with it unless there's any other objections.
Do we know what changes we're actually making?
What I hear is you wanna put the recreation, combine the recreation with the admin personnel committee.
Yes,
And that
public
the-
utilities.
And public utilities, so eliminate that liaisonship and roll that into the duties of the administration subcommittee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, thank you. I was like, wait, what's going into what?
Right,
And it was
those are
in
the
my
two.
original notes, because somehow that sounds like there's too many things going into admin, but when we were, kind of going through the assignments,
I thought you were removing public utilities as a subcommittee.
we were folding, there was an appointment for a public utilities liaison.
Liaison, so we're eliminating the liaison.
Oh, you're right, it was,
Yeah, I think
there
you
was
were-
definitely, we had like 5 boards, committees, and then we were looking to fold them into 4.
Right.
Correct, because so it's recreation is one of the subcommittees.
Okay,
And so it'd be folding that subcommittee into what I'm hearing is admin and personnel, so it would be 4 committees. And then the liaisonship would be eliminated because those duties would be absorbed by the
Mhm.
admin committee, correct?
okay.
I got it, I'll tell you. We'll circulate a draft though,
Sure.
but yeah, I've got it,
Thank you, Mr. Shoddy.
no problem. The clerk submitted his report for December, any questions? The clerk submitted his report for December, any questions for him? Okay. Moving on, construction building department, didn't get any questions on the report there, anything to discuss? All right, engineering is the next one, Mayor and Committee, we have 2 resolutions that we'd like your consideration of, at the next meeting. First is a change order for Colony Tennis, the engineering included a memo in the packet as to the rationale for that change order. And the next one is the local recreation infrastructure grant, which we are hoping to apply for Nash Parks Playground. The deadline for that grant is the end of this month, but we've already gotten a quote for that. And any questions on either of those, objections?
The playground would only be, is that only being considered should we receive the grant, or the playground's being
No, so.
done anyway, and we're hoping for the grant?
The playground is in our capital review and our plan, so, since I started, we've been trying to put together facilities inventory, and our public works director's done a great job of saying, hey, listen, this playground, it's not in good shape, we gotta slate this. So we had this playground, as well as some others on our list. So when grant opportunities come up, I look at that list and draw from there. So it is something that would be done regardless of whether we get it. I can't recall whether this was in the same time frame, of 2025. We may have bumped it up because we look at some of the parameters of the grants that make sense based on the cost, the likelihood it'll be awarded, things like this. So we are gonna do it one way or the other. I don't see a reason we wouldn't get this grant either, because this is one of those things where they award, on average, no more than about $100,000. It's an annual grant. We got it last year, which is good for Mountain View. We do have a component where we have to match some funds anyways, so we'd be contributing to this as well. Okay, thank you. Any questions on the report?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Shoddy, one last thing on the playground. Much like we did with Mountain View,
Yes.
if there is a need to introduce the project to the Environmental Commission with regard to any environmental matters that might be associated with the project.
Sure.
If it's above and beyond what was done in Mountain View, if, for example, the mulch is the same stuff, then probably need not, but at least provide the courtesy introduction to Environment Commission.
Okay, yeah, I will do that. We're not, it's gonna be just a replacement, so the only thing would probably be the mulch, I
Mulch,
think.
right, yeah.
Same thing, we're not looking to, we're using the same footprint, and just kind of replacing with newer and more code compliant, equipment that meets today's standards. But I'll run it by them anyways.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Shoddy.
Moving on to finance, is that fine? Were there no questions on the report, correct? Okay. Finance, we tackled the ordinance, that was the big one, so we would have that on for adoption at the final hearing and adoption at the next meeting. Just to give you an overview of the budget schedule, actually, let me pull that up. You're on that, right?
Yes.
I wanna pull
Gets
up my
the
notes.
committee
on
one
it.
rolling and committee, thank you.
Yes, yes, so let me just pull that up, so I've got consistent information there. So we are, the state announces, there's a state statute that governs when the budgets are due, and then the state, through the Division of Local Government Finance, amends that, the adoption budget deadline, budget adoption deadline for us by the state is April 30th. We are intending to to adopt that at our April 22nd meeting. So working backwards from there, at the April 8th workshop meeting is when we'll do a public presentation as well on the budget, maybe more abbreviated from the introduction. That's basing also off the state deadline to introduce the budget of March 31st. So at the meeting of March 25th is when we hope to introduce the budget. And at the workshop meeting of March 11th is when I'll present the budget to you publicly as the Finance Committee has reviewed it. And so we've got two more meetings, actually we've got two more meetings scheduled, is that correct? That you
Yes.
mentioned? Yes, so two more meetings scheduled on the internal budget meetings with the Finance Committee, and then a couple more meetings internally with the staff to try and have something final there. I think we will be in a good position to mitigate any burdensome tax increases to the residents in light of, as well, a lot of costs that have been thrown at us. One of them I start off the meeting with, which was the tax reval. That's a huge chunk of change, and transportation for affordable housing is hitting us in our budget full this year. So right there between those two, you're looking at almost $250,000 in added expenses right off the bat. So that's separate from healthcare costs and pensions that keep going up. But we are always looking at crafty ways. As you saw, we're bringing in some more revenue through our cell tower lease. We're looking at other ways to reduce costs. So we will be presenting the most fiscally responsible budget to you that we possibly can. Any questions there?
I have no question.
Okay. Police licensing is coming up on the police department now, so that one is an ordinance for police licensing, and included in your package was some information from the chief on that. This is based on a law that was pamphlet law 2022 whatever from the state that came about, calls and a need for improved oversight and accountability of police officers and police departments statewide, making sure that there's a uniform licensing process. The licensing is valid for 3 years. They have to renew. Currently, these are things that, you complete the academy, and then that's it. Granted, they have training that has to happen, but there's no centralized database with the state that, let's say there's misconduct, there's termination, there's, for whatever reason, delicensure, I'll call, something that happens. There's no system for municipalities to really know this stuff and talk and coordinate and communicate and to have that oversight. So the state law does prevail. What the chief is trying to do is incorporate this licensing requirement into our own code, because we do have in our ordinances a section dealing with minimum requirements to be a police officer. So we want to reiterate that and make sure that it's also a local ordinance and that we, future chiefs and future governing bodies and future administrators are aware and bound by that requirement. Any questions there?
No, so it's a recently passed state law, and we're just being on top of things as far as making
Yes.
sure our ordinances are.
Yeah, so I think it passed in 2022, but the part of that law, like with anything, it takes time to implement, as you see with affordable housing, right? This one was not only did they adopt it, but then they referred it to the PTC, which is the Police Training Commission. I believe it falls under the AG's office, if I'm not mistaken, or the state police. And then they had a review period. There was like a lot that went into actually formulating the final rules on this, and so we're at that point where we can adopt this now.
So presumably we will be paying licensing fees, I assume, to get everybody licensed.
We'll see. I mean, part of the union contract, I'm sure that's a negotiable item and will be brought up, but we do account for education and licensure with most of our employees, I would say, whether you're the clerk, the CFO, anybody that's holding the license, there's continuing education credits that's part of that holding the position, and so.
Yep. This is more so a
would
budget,
fall
I assume
with
we're
that.
gonna include in the budget.
More, just add more to the
which
budget.
we're hoping it's a nominal fee.
We'll see what happens. And also, the chief did include in his report an ordinance, to, address the issue of alarms. And, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, what?
Alarms, private alarms.
Mhm.
So, like a lot of towns, back in the day, alarm systems were centralized in police departments. If you've been in some police departments that are really old, you go into maybe a storage closet, a telecommunications room, you just see wires coming in from all over. Those were wires that alarm companies would run to the police departments, so that way, if there was an alarm, they would get that notification. So this comes from that, really, that original ordinance where we have it still on the books that people get an alarm system, they have to register that with us. People don't do that. Now it's all privately, whether it's ADT or it's managed, and they handle the communications with the police department. So this is an obsolete ordinance, and the chief's recommending that we remove it. One, so administratively cleans things up, makes things easier for residents, and not having to worry about another thing that is already taken care of and it's redundant. So the chief would like to clean that up, and it's part of our effort to, we're going through the code book. Last year we found some things, this year we're finding more things that just are a little outdated and we wanna repeal or clarify. Are those both good for the next meeting? Okay, thank you. Public Works, any questions on the report there? Okay, tax collector and tax assessor. We did touch on the ordinance for the, the resolution, the ordinance for the funding of the tax reval. The next meeting, sequentially, we'll hope to adopt that ordinance and then award the contract to the reval firm.
Perfect. So that concludes reports. Mr. Shoddy, yes?
That concludes everything, except for whatever you guys have now.
Well, if I may, now move on to the second hearing of citizens. Mr. LeConte,
Same rules as before.
anyone online?
No hands raised.
Thank you, Mr. LeConte. I see no one before us. So I now would like to close the second hearing of citizens. Do we now go in, we need to
Go
Go
into
into
executive
executive
session,
right?
Need a motion?
All right, so, do I have a motion to go, to executive
So,
session?
we move into executive session, second executive session.
So who's,
And do you have a second?
Second.
And for the record, just
Do
to
we-
clarify, this is for litigation and personnel.
and do we anticipate any action after?
No.
Okay, so if you're ready for a motion, or if you're ready for a vote, Mr. Alperowitz
Yes.
and Mrs. Ewald,
Yes,
Mr. McHugh,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Rowland,
Yes.
and Mayor Choi.
Yes.
Motion passes.
well, it used to be.
Thank you, Mr. LeConte. We are now in executive session.
I have to have a decision early.
Do we have to vote on that?
Bio break, I don't know.
Recording stopped.
I need a mental health break.
No, no.